everybody, welcome back to our channel. Today I am going to read this book called Sitting on Top of the World, Himalayas, about the Himalayan mountain range. So let's begin. I hope you liked the video. Hello everybody, welcome back. Now we're going to read this book. Sitting on Top of the World, Himalayas. Abode of snow. Once upon a time, in a land far away, violent forces shook the earth. Continent crashed into continent. The land heaved and buckled, rumbled and folded, and accordioned upward. And when this cosmic upheaval ended, lo and behold, where the land had been flat, lofty mountains arose. Though this may sound like a myth, it is in fact true. According to the best scientific explanation available today, scientists believe that the Himalaya mountains were formed between 40 and 60 million years ago, when the Indian subcontinent gradually collided with the rest of Asia. The extreme pressure of the collision forced the land to buckle and fold and pile up on top of itself. The collision reached a climax between 500,000 and 2 million years ago. Some notable peaks and their heights. Everest, Nepal, Tibet, 29,028 feet. K2, Kashmir, 28,250 feet. McKinley, Alaska, 20,320 feet. Kilimanjaro, Tanzania, 19,340 feet. Mont Blanc, Alps, France, Italy, 15,771 feet. The collision reached a climax between 500,000 and 2 million years ago, when, in an amazingly short time, from a geological standpoint, the mountains soared another 10,000 feet, making them not only the highest mountains in the world, but also the youngest. Experts say that the Himalayas are still growing at a rate of 6 inches per year. The word Himalaya means abode of snow in the Indian language of Sanskrit. The Himalayas, however, are not only desolate snow-capped peaks. The region also encompasses deep valleys where temperatures can rise to 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer. These valleys are where the people of the Himalayas make their homes. Want to find out more about the Himalayas, its peoples, its history, its wildlife? Grab your oxygen mask and your cold weather gear, your sunscreen, and take your fan and join Kids Discover as we take you on a tour of the mighty Himalayas. The Himalayan mountain chain crosses several countries, including China, northern India, Pakistan, Nepal, and southern Tibet, once independent, now ruled by China. People of the Himalayas, do you ever point your feet at another person? If you visit the Himalayas, you'd better not. Feet being in direct contact with the earth are considered the uncleanest part of the body. Thus, it's thought to be terribly rude to point them in another person's direction. On the other hand, have no fear about sticking out your tongue. It's a respectful way to greet someone in Tibet. Though some of the customs of Himalayan peoples may seem odd to Westerners, there is nothing strange at all about their kindness and relaxed way of life. In fact, as far back as a British official praised the Bhutanese for their trustworthiness and good humor, adding that they were also the best-built race of men I ever saw. Come meet some of the calmly residents of the Himalayas. Some 35,000 Sherpas live in Nepal in the foothills of Mount Everest. The word Sherpa means Eastern people. Over 500 years ago, these people migrated from Tibet. Since the arrival of Westerners bent on climbing the tall peaks, many Sherpas have left behind their yak herding tradition to work as mountain guides, cooks, camp staff, or hotel staff for tourists. These young Sherpa girls have mastered the Western art of bubblegum blowing. This Gurung tribesman from central Nepal dangles over a 395-foot cliff to harvest honey made by the largest honeybees. However, deforestation, the cutting down of trees, has greatly reduced the harvest. The Kangbas live in a region of abrupt mountains, deep valleys, fertile prairies, and waterways in northern Tibet. The Kangbas wear colorful clothing and intricate silver ornaments. Shepherds take along a flute to play music while they watch over their herd of cattle. 90% of all Bhutanese are farmers. This one is drying chilies on a rooftop. They'll later turn up in the spicy food of the region. Many people who live in the remote areas of the Himalayas can't read or write. In many places, schools are not available, and even if they were, parents need their children at home to help with herding animals, gathering wood, or working in the fields. In 1961, Sir Edmund Hillary, who 8 years earlier had been one of the first people to scale Mount Everest, returned to the Himalayas to climb more mountains and build schools for the Sherpas. Many people in Nepal don't have a lot of money to spend on toys, so to amuse them, some children play Firi Firle, a game of button whirling. Archery is the national sport of Bhutan. To see competitors jeer opponents and even jump in front of the target might seem like poor sportsmanship, but it's all part of the game in Bhutan. Still, Bhutanese are never sore losers. Bangchal is a Nepali game similar to chess, but played on a board like Chinese checkers. Players use tiger and goat-shaped pieces, although stones can be substituted in homemade versions of the game. The object is for the tiger to eat all the goats by jumping over them onto open spaces, or for the goats to trap the tigers and keep them from moving. This young girl has just completed one of the chores on her list in the Kathmandu Valley of Nepal, with a strap over her head to help support her load. She carries firewood in a homemade basket. Wildlife of the Himalayas. The Himalayas cover many different terrains, from lofty peaks where nothing can grow or survive, to protect valleys where wildlife abounds. The mountains are divided into 3 ranges running east to west. The high Himalayas, the most northerly mountains, have an average elevation of over 20,000 feet. The lesser Himalayas range from 12,000 to 15,000 feet. And the outer Himalayas, which taper off into the Indian plain, rise from 3,000 to 4,000 feet. As you would expect, the plants and animals vary with the terrain. Above 12,000 feet, there were no trees and, not surprisingly, few animals. Below 12,000 feet, there is great diversity. Think peace. Among the people of the Himalayas, stories a band of large, hairy, human-like creatures called yetis, or wild men of the snows, which has been wrongly translated as abominable snowman. Many photographs have been taken of tracks in the snow. Some claim that they are the prints of a man or bear, enlarged by the melting snow. Others are convinced they are proof that yetis exist. Is the yeti the last remains of a prehistoric animal that once roamed southern China? Is it a folk tale? What do you think? Forests in the foothills of the Himalayas teem with insects, including bumblebees and crane flies. At higher altitudes, many insects have dark bodies to absorb more of the sun's warming rays. Many butterflies are found as high as 14,000 feet. Is it a fox, a raccoon, a cat, or what? Actually, it's a red panda. Although you could never tell from its appearance, it's the closest relative of a giant panda, a nocturnal creature. The red panda spends its days resting in trees. The snow leopard, found up to elevations of 18,000 feet, has wide paws that help keep it from sinking into the snow. Hunted for its fur, the animal is an endangered species. Farmers don't like the snow leopard because it will attack cattle if its natural food supply of wild sheep and goats isn't available. Like the snow leopard, the musk deer is also endangered. People will pay over $200 an ounce for musk from the male scent gland, which is used in the making of perfume. Males are distinguished by the two tusk-like canine teeth. Close members of the crow family followed one climbing expedition up to 27,000 feet. There's no food for them up there, so why do they do it? For the fun of it all. You don't have to go to the Himalayas to see one of the region's most prominent plants. Rhododendron bushes can be found in the U.S. In the Himalayas, however, there are whole forests of them, and they range from tiny dwarf carpeters to 60-foot tree rhododendrons. No mammal lives at higher altitudes than the yak. Wild yaks rarely come below 14,000 feet. Large lung capacity and thick matted hair help them survive in the hostile atmosphere. Domestic yaks found as low as 10,000 feet are an important resource. People make blankets, rope, clothing, and tents out of the thick wool. Yak milk, high in fat content, is made into cheese, yogurt, and butter. Even the yak's droppings can be useful. Above the tree line, they are the only raw material that can be burned for fuel. What grows where in the Himalayas? The great variety of soils in the Himalayas means that everything from mosses to fruit trees and from bamboo to rhododendron can find a home. You can read all of this diagram. To the top, most of the people who call the Himalayas home don't scale the mighty peaks. Mountaintops are the dwelling places of gods and demons. To invade these sacred homes would be foolhardy or sacrilegious. When Europeans discovered the Himalayas, they brought a different altitude. Why climb Mount Everest? Someone asked George Leigh Mallory. Because it is there. was his reply. Mallory probably never did reach the top of Everest. In 1924, he and his partner vanished within 600 feet of the summit, but their fate didn't keep others from trying. Here are just a few of the stories. Check it out. What does the well-dressed and well-equipped mountain climber need in the Himalayas? You'll find part of the answer in the photo. Answer on the back cover. On May 29, 1953, New Zealand beekeeper Edmund Hillary and Sherpa guide Tenzing Norgay became the first humans to stand at the top of Mount Everest. It had not been an easy trek. At 27,900 feet, they spent 2 hours carving a space for their tent for the night. The next day, they determined that the oxygen left in their bottles would support them only 4.5 hours more. Still, they set out, with only 1 minute left before they'd have to start their descent. Hillary climbed upward. Suddenly, he could go no further. They were at the top. The two men shook hands. Hillary photographed Norgay. Norgay buried chocolate, candy, biscuits, and a pencil his daughter had given him as an offering for the gods. Hillary buried a crucifix because the Sherpa had never used a camera and time was short. There were no photographs of Hillary on the rooftop of the world, as Mount Everest had been called. Annapurna was the first of the giant Great Peaks to be scaled. In 1950, Frenchmen Maurice Herzog and Louis Lechenal reached the top, little realizing that the descent would almost kill them. First, strong winds blew off Herzog's gloves. Frostbite followed. Then, Lechenal slipped and lost his ice axe, gloves, and one crampon spiked iron plate on shoe to prevent slipping. After trudging through waist-deep snow and spending the night in a tunnel of ice, they finally reached the base camp. The two had emergency medical procedures which helped save their lives. In 1975, to celebrate International Women's Year, an all-female team of climbers from Japan scaled Mount Everest. Junko Taibei, a 35-year-old mother, became the first woman to successfully make the climb. In 1906, Fanny Bullock Wordman, aged 47, climbed to where a few men and no woman had ever gone. She reached the 22,815-foot summit of the pinnacle peak in the Nukan area of the Himalayas. Amazingly, workmen made the climb without oxygen bottles and while wearing a skirt. Angrita Sherpa from Nepal holds the record from being the Sherpa with most successful climbs of Mount Everest. He has made it to the top 9 times. Since the early 1900s, Sherpas have been helping foreigners climb in the Himalayas. 1991, the first all-Sherpa expedition scaled Mount Everest in honor of past Sherpa mountaineers. 100 divine epics would not suffice to describe all the marvels of the Himalayas. Sanskrit proverb. Religions of the Himalayas. Though the Himalayas are among the youngest mountains in the world. Most of the people living there practice two of the world's oldest religions, Hinduism and Buddhism. Hinduism is so old that it doesn't have a single founder. It began in India over 4,000 years ago and encompasses a variety of beliefs. One of its basic principles is the commitment to an ideal way of life called dharma. Buddhism developed from the thinking of a Hindu nobleman named Siddhartha Gautama, who lived about 2,500 years ago. Gautama gave up his comfortable way of life to seek enlightenment through prayer and meditation. When he found it, he became known as Buddha, the Enlightened One. Hinduism is the religion of the majority of Nepalese, while most Tibetans and Bhutanese are Buddhists. Many people in the Himalayas, however, practice a mixture of the two religions, which exist side by side in harmony. Monks help educate young Sering Dorje, who is believed to be a reincarnation of a Lama who died 10 years ago. The idea of reincarnation is one of the basic beliefs of Buddhism and Hinduism. According to this belief, when a person dies, his or her soul is reborn in a different body. A person's actions in one life determine whether the next existence will be easier or more difficult. A young Spanish boy is thought to be the reincarnation of Lama Yeshe, Wisdom, who died in 1984. The boy's name is now Lama Spiritual Master Osil, Bright Light. He spent a year in monasteries in Nepal and India and received his monastic vows from the Dalai Lama. When he is 16, he will begin his life as a full-fledged spiritual leader or Lama. Colorful prayer flags can be seen throughout Tibet. They are used as altars by Hindus and Buddhists. Both Hinduism and Buddhism teach respect for all living creatures. Because of this, most Hindus do not eat meat. Buddhists may eat meat, but they don't kill the animals themselves. The yak meat for sale in this Bhutanese marketplace was butchered by a northern people called the Makheps. The Dalai Lama is the spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhists. When China took control of Tibet in the 1950s, the 14th Dalai Lama above was forced to flee to India. Today, he has many followers all over the world. Pilgrims from all over Tibet come to the Jokang temple in Lhasa to worship. With mats for comfort, the pilgrims lie down, sometimes for hours, to humble themselves before Buddha. Buddhists believe that a prayer does not have to be spoken to be heard. People place written prayers or chants in prayer wheels, cylinders with handles. A weight on the end of a short chain inside the handle helps make the prayer wheel spin. Spinning a prayer wheel lets the prayer be repeated over and over. The human scale. With mountains that rise thousands of feet into the sky, you might expect anything in the Himalayas built by humans to appear rather puny. And indeed, seen from a distance, the structures of humans and mere specks in the vast Himalayan landscape. Up close, however, some of them are remarkable. Let's take a look at the varied architecture of the Himalayas. Potala Palace, located in Lhasa, Tibet's capital, is the most famous structure in the Himalayas. More like an enclosed city than a single building, the palace is 13 stories tall and contains over 1,000 rooms. Before China took control of Tibet in the 1950s, the Patala was the spiritual and governmental center of Tibet and the home of the Dalai Lama. Since he fled in 1959, his room at the palace has stayed just as it was the day he left. Monks at Takht Shang Monastery in Bhutan Lake turns meditating alone in a retreat on the side of a cliff for 3 years, 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days. Hindu worship does not usually involve large congregations of people. Instead, for a pious Hindu, daily worships may involve visits to several shrines and a temple plus home worship. This Hindu temple, called Ghat, is in Nepal on the Bagmati River. When you see a tired temple called a pagoda, you may think you are in China. Actually, pagodas originated in Nepal, where an architect named Arniko first built them in the 13th century. His work caught the attention of the Emperor of China, who brought Arniko to China to introduce the style. Stupas are dome-shaped Buddhist shrines. One of the most famous in Nepal's Great Stupa at Bodhnath. Atop a gold-covered dome, 4 pairs of eyes look out at the 4 corners of the earth. Prayer flags fly in the breeze, and in a small room near the gate, a huge prayer wheel is turned continuously by worshippers. A chorten can be a simple pile of rocks or a more elaborate structure. The simple ones may contain only a prayer scroll or have a few holy words scratched on them. More elaborate chortens often hold the ashes of local saints or lamas. Dzongs are Bhutanese monastic fortresses. Most date back to the 17th century and were built to keep out invaders from the north. No nails were used in the construction of dzongs, which are characterized by thick walls that slope inward, pitched roofs, and detailed woodwork. Gallery of Himalayan bridges. Many rivers flow through the Himalayas, and over the year, people have devised some breathtaking ways to cross them. Here's a sampling of the bridges of the Himalayas. Trouble in Shangri-La. High in the Himalayas is a Buddhist monastery where no one ever grows old. Of course it's fictional. James Hilton portrayed such a monastery in his 1933 novel, Lost Horizon. He called the monastery Shangri-La, and since then the word has come to mean a place of perfect happiness and harmony. To most environmentalists, however, today's Himalayas are no Shangri-La. Since 1953, more than 500 people have reached the summit of Mount Everest. Every year, 900 mountaineers climb the highest peaks of the Himalayas, and 40,000 go trekking at lower levels. All of these climbers create trash. It's estimated that 50 tons of it are scattered about at different levels of Mount Everest. In addition to the problem of litter, there is the problem of deforestation, cutting down of trees. Rapid population growth has forced people to ascend to higher altitudes in order to obtain sufficient wood for building and energy production. Tourism has caused more and more trees to be cut down in order to build new facilities and provide firewood. Cutting down trees causes erosion of topsoil. What's being done to preserve the environment of the Himalayas? According to one Nepalese ecologist, the Himalayan region now has 3 major religions: Hinduism, Buddhism, and tourism. The largest increase in tourism, which began in the 1970s, brings economic advantages for the Himalayan nations, but also puts a strain on natural resources. A group of residents of Nepal show their support for the Annapurna Conservation Project with a banner proclaiming, "You enjoy nature, preserve it." Don't just show up in the Himalayas expecting to climb. To protect the fragile environment, the governments of Himalayan nations require all climbers to have permits, which now cost hundreds of dollars. For some mountains, there's a long waiting list for climbers. The debris on Mount Everest ranges from tents and oxygen bottles, baseball bats, and frisbees, to bloody bandages and dead bodies preserved in the snow. In 1994, Brent Bishop, son of the late Barry Bishop, one of the 4 Americans to reach Everest's summit during the first U.S. expedition in 1962, organized a cleanup of Mount Everest. Sherpas received bonuses for bringing 5,000 pounds of trash off the mountain. Stacks of lumber will be transported to nearby villages for building projects. In the Sherpa village of Khumbu, high in the Himalayas, by law, only the 6 main beams needed for a 2-story house can be cut nearby. The other lumber must come from lower regions where wood is not quite so scarce. The Annapurna Range contains several of the world's highest mountains, as well as one of its deepest valleys. Home to 40,000 people, the range is visited by about 25,000 trekkers a year. To preserve the natural environment, the government of Nepal began the Annapurna Conservation Area Project in 1986. In a revolutionary arrangement, fees paid by trekkers go directly to the local population, who are encouraged to use alternative energy sources and other conservation methods to preserve the area.